Hey everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining another edition of Trailhead Live. My name is Mohit. I'm a developer evangelist here at Salesforce. In this Trailhead Live session today, we're going to talk about how to successfully retrieve your org metadata from Salesforce using packages and Salesforce CLI. Do not make any purchasing decisions based on the forward-looking statements here. So let's look at the learning objectives for today. So today we're going to explore what is org metadata and what is happy soup. We'll look at some of the Salesforce CLI commands to explore your org metadata. We'll also understand the dependency between metadata, how to sort of explore the dependency between the metadata using packages. And then I'll also talk about what is source tracking feature. Now, the reason why we are talking about source tracking feature is because a lot of the complexity of tracking down the metadata and dependencies easily goes away if you work in a source tracking org. Source tracking orgs are usually built into Sandboxes. This feature is in beta, while Scratch orgs, which is in GA, where you have this source tracking enabled. Also, we'll look at how we can retrieve our metadata using Salesforce CLI and the packages. So without further ado, let's get started. So what is metadata in Salesforce? So in Salesforce, you primarily do three things. So one important thing that you do is you write code. So maybe you're writing an Apex class, or let's say you're writing an LWC component, or you're writing an Aura component or Visualforce page. All these are code components. You might be using an IDE like Visual Studio Code to sort of edit your code and save it to the org. Now that is code. Now you also do config in Salesforce. That's the power of the platform, where what you do, we give you a lot of standard capabilities. On top of it, you customize it by creating custom objects, creating page layouts, creating various record types. There are a lot more things that you can do just by configuration, like setting your security, creating your profiles or permission sets and assigning them, configuring things like org by default. So all of this, like the configuration that you do and the code that you write, and also you might be doing some settings, like for example, setting the language or enabling features, like for example, you're enabling a live agent feature for your customer service functionality, or you're enabling, let's say, opportunity splits, for sales, right? So there are a lot more settings. Similarly, there are settings for automation. So there are a lot of settings that you can do through setup, right? So you're primarily doing either, when you get your Salesforce org, you're either configuring the features and the settings, or you are, sort of configuring the metadata, right? You're configuring. I'll come to metadata what it is, but you're configuring Salesforce, through low-code tools like automation tools, your reports. You're creating dashboards, and then you're writing code, to achieve all your business objectives. So these are the three, high-level things that you do, and everything you do is stored in the objects here in the back end as metadata. We call it as metadata. There are various types of metadata. In fact, you should go to metadata developer guide to understand different metadata type we have. So we have we have different metadata types. Like if you go to this metadata type, you will see that we have so many metadata for different functionalities, whether they are related to sales, service, or industry cloud, right? So all of the configurations and code and settings, features, all of these are exposed as a metadata API in Salesforce. And those are stored as an XML packet that we call it as metadata. And when you want to replicate the feature from one org to the another org, you usually deploy these metadata. So we provide you a file-based calls, like for example, retrieve and deploy, so that you can take this, packet of XML, which usually there's a manifest file called package.xml. I'll talk about that. So you take that package.xml along with the zip file, which has all these metadata sort of organized into folders, and you sort of deploy to another Salesforce environment. Okay, and there are different ways to do that. One of the ways is obviously packaging. With packaging, you can sort of bundle all the metadata together, and then you create a packaging, and then you just deploy the packaging via a installation URL. So that's another technique. The other technique is obviously through the metadata API deployment. So you take a zip file and you deploy to the other orgs, right? So that's another technique of deploying metadata. So now what we're going to do here is we're going to explore, okay, so we know what is metadata, and you understand what is metadata, right? So now in this episode, what we're going to do is understand how we can sort of explore what is there in our org. So I have created an org. So basically this is an org. It's a developer edition org. So you can go to developer.salesforce.com/signup and get developer org. And from there, I took one of our sample gallery apps. So if you don't know about sample gallery apps, just go to sample gallery apps, and you can find a lot of applications here. Sample gallery applications which demonstrate various functionalities and features of the platform. Now, one of my favorite app is Easy Spaces application. So Easy Spaces application sort of demonstrates unlock packages, modular application design. So what I did is I took all the metadata that's there in this application, the Easy Spaces, and sort of deployed to one of the orgs. This org is in winter 21. All of the orgs are winter 21 after this release, right? So I took that metadata and sort of deployed to this org. So if you look at this org, it has all the metadata. So for example, if I go to Apex classes, I can see various classes here that I deployed from this repo. Okay, so I just dumped everything from this repo into this org. So that I can show you how we can, sort of retrieve the metadata from this org using various techniques, etc. Right? So there's a lot of metadata in this org. Basically we had divided this whole metadata into 4 different packages. So this org has a lot of metadata. It has a lot of Lightning components, Lightning pages, templates, etc. So there's a lot of metadata that is there in this org. So if you look at Lightning components, right? So we have so many components that we have built. A lot of them are LWC, some of them are Aura components, right? So we have that, and we also have some objects and permissions and fields. So, I deployed everything to this org so that, we can explore, how to work with this metadata, right? So the first question that somebody has, like when you have an org, when you approach a project where you have a lot of metadata already in the org, right? If you do not have, a source control, what is a source control? Now, a source control is, let's say, something like a Git, where you extract all the metadata and keep it so that, next time you're working on a feature, you just clone that GitHub project, you deploy to Salesforce, or you start working, on the feature, right? And then, whatever the Delta metadata components that you build, you actually again retrieve them and, sort of put them on the Git repo, and, you basically create a branch. Let's say you create a branch and you deploy the metadata, right? So that it becomes really easy, when you have your metadata in the source control. Now, you might get into a scenario where, your organization never, bothered to sort of source control your metadata or whatever settings that you have in the org, or whatever metadata that you have in the org exists in the org itself, and you're using something, we call it as org based development. So let's assume that you're using an org based development. So in org based development, let's say you do all your code, everything in the org itself, and then you create chain sets and you're deploying to another higher environments where it is QA, and finally it's getting merged to production environment, right? So you're never sort of working with you're never sort of versioned your metadata, right? So now it becomes a challenge for you to adopt these tools. Now, one of the challenges that you will get with org based development is it will not scale if you have a lot of developers, because developers can step over each other's code because everything is in one org, right? And that way it becomes really difficult to handle. Now, one strategy to overcome that is by doing something like let's say every developer gets their own developer sandboxes, and they build their feature, and then you finally merge to UID, which is fine. It still works. But imagine that you want the visibility of the features or the code. You want to review those features that are getting built. You want to establish collaboration between developers. It becomes hard, if you do not have a source control, because if you have a source control, there's a common source and everybody is working off that source, so there's a visibility among your teams. Okay, so that's why it's very important to do source control, or have source control for your project, and then you do source driven development, right? So one of the bottlenecks for that is, okay, how do I retrieve the metadata? How do I retrieve that metadata that's there in the org into my local VS Code so that I can start working with it? Okay, so really what I've done here is I've scaffolded an empty project, and you can really do that very easily with the tools. So I'll talk a bit about the tools that you need. So you need tools like Salesforce CLI. So if you're not familiar with that, go install it. If you type Salesforce CLI download, you will get these websites, and one of the websites is developer.salesforce.com/tools/sfdx-CLI, where you can go and sort of download depending on the operating system that you are using. So you download the Salesforce CLI. That's the number one tool you need, and Salesforce CLI really is a nice tool for a lot of the things that you can do. For example, you can manage your orgs, you can export data, import data, you can execute your tests, you can install packages. There's so many things that you can do with Salesforce CLI, and you can easily extend these CLIs with your own custom plugins, etc. So it's important that you have this tool, Salesforce CLI, in your tool set, when you're working with Salesforce. So you'll need Salesforce CLI first for working with your metadata, and that's the default tool that we'll use. This is where it becomes really easy if you have Salesforce CLI to work with metadata. Because one thing you need is you have to authenticate that Salesforce CLI with your org, and then from there everything gets easier to retrieve and work with this metadata operations that I'm going to show you. So that's okay. So that's the first thing, right? Which is having this. The other thing is having Visual Studio Code or any IDE of your choice. You just pick up one of the IDEs, right? I recommend Salesforce, CLI, because I recommend the VS Code because we have this extension called Salesforce extension pack. So Salesforce extension pack is really cool extension pack that sort of has all these tools. Like, for example, it provides you code editing features for Apex. It has nice little SLDS validator for validating your style sheets that you're writing using SLDS, the classes that you're writing. It makes sure that the validation is taken care of. You can edit web components, Lightning Web components. You can edit Aura components. You can edit Visual Force. You can debug using the replay debugger, right? So there are also certain commands in Salesforce CLI, and all of those commands sort of is baked and provided a nice little UI with the Salesforce extension pack. So I highly recommend that you use Salesforce CLI and also this Visual Studio Code extension pack and the Visual Studio Code itself. Okay, so these are two things, right? So the next thing you have to do, to get your org metadata is go to command palette and say sfdx and say create a project. Okay, so you create a project and you choose standard. Okay, so that's the standard template we can create for a normal project, which sort of scaffolds something like this. The scaffolds a force app, it'll give you some metadata. Like, it'll not give you any metadata primarily. It's gonna essentially give you a scaffold. Nothing will be there. It'll have a config file, and it'll have certain things. But the key is, okay, so now once you scaffold an empty project, the next step here is to actually authenticate your Salesforce org with the Salesforce CLI, right? So you basically say sfdx and then say authorize an org. So you say authorize an org. So I'll talk about what is a dev hub later, but for this one, all you need is authorize an org. You just authorize your org. You basically say authorize, you pick up one of these. Like for developer orgs, you're gonna say production. Sandboxes, you're gonna say sandbox, and then you authorize. So once you authorize, in this case I've authorized already. So once you authorize, right, you will see the alias for the org here, and then once you click on like open the org, it will open the org. So it'll run a command called sfdx force org open, which is a CLI command. So notice this, that all the commands are there in the Salesforce CLI, and the Visual Studio Code extension pack just uses those commands to execute, by user interaction, so that you don't have to type. Like, for example, I can come here and I can say sfdx force org open and open the org, and the same command is getting run, when you clicked on this little browser icon here. Okay. So these are the tools that you need. Right now, let's look at how to sort of retrieve the metadata, right? From the org, like how do I retrieve the metadata, right? And so one of the the important things to first figure out is, okay, how much of metadata do I have in my org, right? Is it exceeding like 500? Is it in thousands? It's hard to know, right? And one of the really cool utilities here built is called org browser. So org browser is like, it shows you all the metadata. It has the list of all the metadata that it supports, and then you basically click on that, and it's going to show you the metadata. Like, for example, I have these many classes in my org. It's not a big org, right? It's a small org. It's an org with small number of metadata components. So I can click on that, view on that, right? And when you click on, like, say, I want to download all of these, like, for example, it will download everything into your local so that you can edit it, right? Which is cool, which is really good that this tool does. But this is good if you are like using chain set sort of approach, where you want to retrieve certain things out of your org, quickly work on that, and then it further uses chain sets to sort of move from one org to another org, right? So that's the ultimate aim of using something like org browser, right? Something like org browser. This is what it's meant for. Now, that's good that you have org browser, but it's really not great. If you're like using source driven development and you want to like just take everything from the org and sort of work and source control this into your Git, right? So first of all, what I recommend from working on a lot of the projects is, do not sort of take your whole metadata and and put it into the source control just like as it is, without sort of organizing them into small modules. Because what happens that way is, for smaller projects it's still fine, but as your project sort of grows, you will see that you're maintaining like one folder, and it's like an Apex folder that has like 200s of classes, 300s of classes, right, without sort of having any interdependency or modularizations and things like that. And that makes it harder to work and sort of onboard the next developers. It sort of makes it very hard to scale, and that's why we recommend that you go through, like, you have a strategy. You should put together a strategy in place to sort of use something like an unlock package, where you start grouping all your metadata, and that's what it's called, happy soup, right? So in your org today, right, you have all the metadata sort of in this format called happy soup, where you have all the metadata that you have created for an application. You also have managed packages. You might also have other packages. So there's a lot of metadata, right? So you should start breaking them into modules, so that it's easier to manage, easier to enhance your applications, and so on. So that's happy soup. For it's basically a term used to say everything exists, everything is working. It's not organized, but it's there. And your aim should be to break this happy soup into individual modules, and work in modules. It becomes really easy to enhance and things like that. There are some patterns. You keep talking in different contexts, like how do you want to break metadata. One of them is horizontal slicing or vertical slicing. I have these slides. I'll share it with you, and you can have some strategies around how to sort of slice and dice your package. All right. So without further ado, let's take a look at some of the commands that shows different types of metadata that exist in your org, and how to sort of list your metadata. So one of the commands that I have is force. I think it's called force metadata. Let's see. So it's called, okay, so there's nothing called. So you can always do a help on the SFDX CLI, so that it lists all the commands. So one of the commands that really provides a lot of capabilities is obviously force MD API commands, because this provides ability to retrieve and deploy metadata. And there's also a command called force source, which does the same thing, except that force source MD API sort of has commands in the format, which we call it as traditional metadata format, in which there was not a lot of organization. So if you look at the source format, so for example, if I search for SFDX source format, which is the new format, you can see that it has really cool differences. Like, for example, if you look at the original format, right? The original format, the static resource used to be a zip file. Now you can easily see it is broken up into individual files that you can work with in your IDE. Also, these custom objects, right? It was like one object file. Now it is split into objects, fields, and business processes, field sets, and all of the things. There is a it's basically composed. Now the object file is composed, and it has more details, and it's more organized actually. So that's the thing. Also, if you're working with communities, there's an experience bundle. That's unlike, it's not zip file anymore. It's it's not just one zip binary file. It's broken down into multiple files with JSON format, which is really easy to read and work with. So that's the DX source format, right? So for that, right, that's why we have source commands to work with DX source format. But if you're still using traditional formats, right, you can use the SFDX force source MD API commands, except that you'll note that it will produce a zip file, and you'll have to unzip yourself and get the package XML, etc. Anyways, that was not my aim. My aim was to actually show you some of the MD API commands. So let's look at some of the MD API commands here. So I want to do a help on MD API commands, right? And the commands that I want to pay special attention today is describe metadata, right? And the list metadata. So these two commands are not generally used, but they are really handy to understand the metadata types that are there in your org. So for example, force MD API describe metadata command, right? So this command displays the metadata types enabled for your org. So for example, if I type sfdx MD API deploy, deploy command, sorry, not deploy, has to be MD API and describe metadata command, describe metadata, and I do a help on this. Just do a help on this. Okay, it's really all that you do is there's really not much. You provide the API version, and then you can also store the resulting file somewhere. Okay, so let's run this describe metadata command and store the file somewhere. So we go here and say describe metadata, and let's say we want to store this as, metadata dot text. That's where we want to store it. Let me say slash. Okay. Yeah, so I want to store this. Let's see what happens. Okay, I have to provide a related path here. Let's provide the path of the project. Copy path. Let's provide the path of the project here. So I'm gonna say let's put it here probably. Yeah, because it's not able to write it to my folder file system because it doesn't have the permission. I want to store it in the same folder here. Okay, so I want to describe the metadata. So if you notice, right, there is a metadata.txt file. So this file, right, this file will tell me, okay, what are the metadata that my org has enabled, right? So if you look at, right, my org has installed packages, my org has so this is like child elements basically to the main elements. And if you look at that, right, so these are some of the metadata I have, like for example, Aura, components, pages, queues, data sources. And so these are all metadata. There's metadata, and also there is. So now important thing here to pay attention to, let's take an example of an Apex here, right? Let's take an example of Apex. What can we do with this file, right? So let's take an example of Apex classes maybe. So Apex class, right? So look at this. So the directory name is the name that you see here. So that's whenever a metadata is sort of retrieved, it actually goes into the directory name. Usually it goes into the directory name that has those classes, right? And then the suffix of the classes will be CLS. So if you have a name of the class, it will be .cls. Okay, that's what suffix is meant for. And the XML name, that is where it is really gets interesting, is the XML name corresponds to the metadata name. So if you look at the metadata developer guide, and if you look at let's look at the metadata guide that we were seeing, the metadata developer guide, right? So in the metadata guide, if you see Apex class, right, that's where it's written Apex class, right? So now with this file actually in your project, right, it becomes very easy to handcraft package XML to retrieve, anything from the org. Now, you can retrieve by writing the package XML, which now you really don't need to, because you can use the same Apex class XML name to retrieve. So let's take an example. So let's write an example. So let's say for source command, right? Let's do a help on this. Right, so for source, let's say I want to retrieve a specific class, right? So I say for source retrieve, right? So do a for source retrieve, and let's do a help on this. So for source retrieve has, okay, excellent. Yeah, so this is what I want to capture here. So if you look at it, right, so you need the XML name, and then you can put a colon, and then you can specify the name of the class, right? So for example, let's say I want to retrieve, so I say for source retrieve, let's say I want to retrieve, maybe I want to retrieve all the classes, right? So I just say metadata and then say the XML name. So XML name is Apex class, right? So I say Apex class and I say retrieve. Now this will retrieve all the Apex classes. So there you go. So now if you look at my folder, which was empty before, now has all the classes, you know. So this is how you can use the describe API information and sort of retrieve everything. But as you can see, there are so many metadata. So this method will not sort of really work if you have like too much of metadata in the arc, because then, you know, you have to find out the number of metadata components. I think we already have like around the metadata coverage report will tell how many of them we have. So if you really put this into, so we have like 396 entries, right? So in your org you might have like hundreds of them, so you know you're running hundreds of these commands and not scalable, right? And you can script it. One way, you know, to get all the metadata from the org will be to script this, you know, like have a script which basically says you know, retrieve m, and you know you provide, and then you know basically provide a pipe command, and then you know another one, so create like a big file, and then you retrieve everything, and then you start organizing them. And that's one way of doing it. Again, it's a lot of manual work for the first time, so not like scalable for sure, and requires a lot of work, right? And that's where, you know, the packages will come, and I'll talk about how you can shortcut this thing into packages, right? Now, sometimes you want to know, okay, how many classes are there in your org, or how many, like, for example, let's pick up LWC, right? If I go to LWC, I want to know how many Lightning component bundle is there in my org, right? I want to know that. I want to know its API name, who created it, etc. So let's look at our next command, which is force MD API, and instead of describe metadata, I want to do a list metadata this time. So let's look at the list metadata command here. So list metadata command, let's do a help on this. So look at this. So list metadata command is what you can do in the list metadata command. Sorry, I forgot one more thing actually. So the previous command that I was talking about, right? The source retrieve. Now this also supports, you know, you can write something like this. Like for example, I want to retrieve profile. I want to retrieve, you know, custom object, right? So you can really put a colon, and you know you can keep writing it, right? So but still, you know, imagine writing, you know, 300s or hundreds of metadata component. It becomes a really big command. You know, I'm pretty sure you'll hit one of those exceptions when the command sort of becomes large, right? Anyway, so that was one of the things, and let's get back to the list metadata command here. The list metadata command lists down the things. Like for example, I want to list, like let's say I want to list you know, the number of custom objects that I have, right? So I say list metadata m and say custom object. Now note that custom object also means all the objects essentially in the org, including standard. So let's list them out. So now what it's going to do is it's going to give me a list of all the objects, you know, including standard, custom, everything that is there in my org. It'll be a big JSON. I can pipe this to a JSON file. Let's see if we can pipe this also to a JSON file, because the terminal will not display everything. So let's do a help on this command to see if they provide anything to pipe this. If not, yeah. So there's a command F where we can pipe this. So for example, let's say I want to list all the custom objects, right, in my org. which again, as I said, custom object is the metadata name. That means, it simply means it has all the objects actually, even though it says custom objects, but it means all the objects. So let's do this. So custom object f, I want to store this and call it as custom objects dot json. Let's store this as custom objects dot json. Again, I want to store this in the project root, and the project root, let's copy the path. Let's copy the path. Again, no full path. You can use feel free to use the relative paths. It should work. Okay, so let's write it. Okay, now it brought a file called customobjects.json. So if you look at this, okay, this is not JSON formatted. It's not JSON formatted. We can use JSON lint to just format it better. There you go. Okay, so these are all the objects in my org, right? So I have an inventory of all the objects. So you can use the list command essentially to get all the objects or all the metadata essentially. They're very useful commands: describe metadata and list metadata. Not a lot of you know, but this is how you can also create a package XML essentially. So if you look at the metadata API document here, where was the metadata API document? There you go. So here, right, if you look at it, right, we show you how to create a package XML essentially. Now, traditionally, you needed, you can also use like retrieve command and provide a package.xml, which is an XML file specifying the types of metadata that you need to retrieve. So you can specify it by using by using the XML name that I showed you. So remember that I showed you an XML name. So look at this. So the custom object is the XML name that we got it from the describe command, right? So we got from the describe command, that becomes your name, and then your members are nothing but what you get in your list metadata commands. So essentially that creates this package XML. So you'll have to create the version and this header, and this will give you the package XML. Now what you can do is you can use sfdx for source retrieve and retrieve the metadata. So for source retrieve, if you do a help on this, you will see that it also has an option to specify the path to the package XML. You see, so you can, essentially you can do like this. You can say X, and in your project you can have package.xml and provide the package.xml, and this will retrieve all the metadata from that you specified in the package.xml. That's a really handy thing, right? So if you already have like a package.xml manifest, then you just provide and write this command, the command to retrieve metadata, like for source retrieve metadata, provide the package XML in order to whatever the components you specified in the package.xml, right? But you still need to create that package XML, and that's that takes a lot of time, because you'll have to essentially go and look at all the metadata in the org. Now there are things there that can help, like for example, if you want everything, you can put a star. So there will be a lot of components that will support star, and you can actually extract that information whether it supports star or not by by metadata, by the describe metadata. It will tell you whether it sort of supports that or not. Yeah, so using this information list is really handy again, right? So now let's come back to the slides. Okay, so So we understood the org metadata, we understood what is happy soup, we understood the explanation of these commands. Now this is where our next objective is understanding the dependency between various metadata types. Like, what is this dependency? How does the dependency gets created, and how to track them, how we can sort of retrieve components along with the dependencies. Okay, so what is dependency and how does the dependency happen? So let's imagine that you have created an object. Okay, so for example, in the Easy Spaces application, right? So we have this object called Spaces, right? Space is an object that we have created. It's a custom object. Now, you know, it's not just that I have the object, right? So I have fields for that object. So I've created all these fields, right? I have page layouts that I've created. I've created some record pages. Probably there's no record pages for spaces, but maybe I have some compact layouts. No, I don't have compact layout for this, but imagine you have record types, you have triggers on them, you have validation rules. You can do a lot with customizations itself on Salesforce, like with clicks, right? So imagine I have an object and then I have fields, right? Now the field metadata is depending on an object, okay? And then if I reference that field in an Apex class, then the Apex class is now dependent on that field, right? Now let's say I have another Apex class, right, which calls this Apex class which has the fields in it, right? So this establishes a dependency. So if you look at this diagram that I have here, right? So there is a dependency between the metadata here, and if you look at here, there's a custom object, right? You can have fields. The fields can be referenced in page layouts, validation rules, or this can be referenced in Apex classes and LWC, right? So this creates this whole dependency thing, right? And oftentimes your deployments actually fail because you do not understand the dependency between them. So for example, you're trying to deploy let's say Apex class, and you forgot to sort of deploy the object that Apex class had a reference to. So in that case, your deployments fail, right? And when you're manually doing this process, right, it takes a lot of time because there are a lot of dependency that has happened, unknowingly, or because you never think about the dependency when you are doing your configurations. When you're doing the code, okay, then it makes sense, and you can track. Again, it's hard to track these dependencies. So it gets automatically established in the org, and if you do not track them, track the dependencies, if you do not sort of maintain a source of your project and its dependency in the source control, and you're not validating it always, right? It's oftentimes you will see that you'll have tough times during the project deployment. Like a lot of projects that I've seen, what happens is developers sort of write and focus only on code and config, and they never focused on how they're going to move the source from one org to another. And let's say after the project, like 3 months, they never thought about this, how they're going to move, right? And all that they had was whatever they see in their IDE, and they're trying to zip it and deploy it using tools like Salesforce CLI or Workbench or anything like that, right? If they're not tracking the dependency, if you're not sure that you have captured all the dependencies, those deployments are gonna fail. And you'll fix it, you'll again find some gaps, you'll fix it, right? So you'll keep on doing this endless process of fixing things, right? Which you should be doing from the beginning, right? So that's where a lot of metadata deployments take a lot of time, because you're not tracking the dependencies. Okay, so that's why with source-driven development, all those things goes away because you are always tracking your source and validating it. For example, if you're using Scratch orgs, right, you're making sure that the whole code sort of deploys, right? If you have a CI/CD pipeline, you're making sure that whole source is deployed to an org and it deploys fine, right? So you're very sure of that. Okay, so that's why it's important to understand these dependencies. And a lot of dependencies will happen unknowingly. Like for example, let's say you created an object, you added permissions to it, your permission set now has a dependency on the object, right? You created a tab for that object. Now the tab has dependency for that. You created an app, comprising of many tabs. Now the app has, the dependency, and that's the top level metadata element, right? So that is where this technique that I wanted to explain in this Trailhead Live session is, how do we solve this maze of dependencies, right? And one effective technique that has always worked for me is I use package manager. Okay, now a lot of you might think that using something like a package manager is only meant for like ISVs or when you're creating managed packages or unlock packages or unmanaged packages. It's only meant for them. Actually, it is not. It is you can create a package, you can delete them, and one of the questions that I often get in the community is, let's say I've created a package and I delete it. That does it mean that all my metadata gets deleted? No, it's not like that. A package just tags your metadata to a specific name. So let me give you an example of how you can use these packages to sort of understand the dependencies between the metadata components, right? So let's say let's call it as let's use one of the classes, right? So one of the classes. So where did I get? Do I have the list of classes? Yeah. So I had some classes here, like for example, market services. Now let's imagine I want to understand what are the dependencies of market services, like on which elements does the market services depend on, right? So for that, I can easily do this. So I'm going to say market services dependency is my package name, right? Just going to save it. Now, I'm going to add that Apex class to it. Now look at this. So you get all the metadata here, and you can add the metadata to this package. So for example, I want to go to, let's say I want to go to the Apex class, right? The market services. So I go to market services, I add them to the package. Now notice what happens. It's not just the Apex class market services that got added to this, okay? So notice a very special behavior of these. So market services. So if you look at this, right? So that's how I get a remove button only on that, not for other else, because other things are dependent. So what it did, it actually did a spidering of all the metadata components that market services was depend on. Like for example, I have market services, right? So if you look at this, it has a query on space. So it actually picked up all the space object, right? It did pick up all the space objects for me. And then the object had a dependency on the field. So it picked up all the fields, right? And then the layouts that were associated to that pick list values that were associated. For example, it had dependency on the global value set, right? So it actually picked up that. So if you look at this, right, so it picked up all the dependencies for you automatically, and that's the power. Now you need not upload this. You need not upload this package. It remains in your org. You can, as I said, you can feel free to create as many as like this, and you can delete them, right? Even though it says like type unmanaged, you're really not using this for anything else. I'll show you the exact way you can extract everything along with the package XML, in your IDE. So let's see how we can extract this whole package, in your IDE. Now it's very simple actually. So all you do is sfdx force source retrieve. So s types force source retrieve, and then name, and then I provide the package name. Now you can put it in the codes, because there's a space in between the name of the package. Now look at this. So I do force source retrieve and the name of the package, and see what happens. And it's gonna take some time. So as you can see, what happened here is it created a separate folder within my project workspace, and all of the metadata here, I see all of the metadata that was there in here is beautifully sort of retrieved and grouped by the metadata type. So that's the power of packages. If you really understand this, right, you add the top level element and it will pull everything for you, just by doing one command. And you get all the dependencies. Of course, you can, basically, obviously go back and see if you have missed anything. For example, in this case, application is missing, right? So I can add them. I can obviously browse and see if there are any missing items and add to the package. But the idea here is, that you don't have to add individual components one by one. If you find the top level metadata and add it to the package, you can retrieve everything. Let's do once more. I want to do this once more, just to showcase. Now I want to pull everything in my org. Okay, so how do I do it, right? Again, pulling everything is okay, right? For the first time, right? And after that, you should really get a strategy to, sort of organize these into multiple small bundles or packages, so that you can easily work. And that's where the Easy Spaces shines. That's where we showcase this in our Easy Spaces application. So go to this application and see how we have sort of organized the metadata into its own individual components. And then you can also explore how we sort of do and unlock packages based on different components, right? So that's something to explore. But how do I retrieve everything, right? So I'm working on it. The storyline here is I want to retrieve everything that's there in my org. I want to see in the IDE, right? I'm moving away from this org based development to the source driven development. And I want to make sure that I see all the metadata so that I can start thinking through it. How do I find all this dependency, right? So as I've shown you, one real way is actually to just create these packages from the package manager, and create as many as you want. Use them. Use this whole idea of package manager. Use this whole idea of the dependency management, right? And use the whole idea of sorry, I got too excited here. So use the whole idea of packages, because they can help you track the dependencies. And and one of the other cool things is if you actually go to view dependencies, right, it'll tell you where things are referenced. For example, this had only object operational references, right? But one of the feature is it will also tell you if there are any feature dependencies. Like for example, if you need live agent enabled in the org, and if you have a component that references it, it's going to tell if you click on the view dependency. So that's the power of the package manager. Again, you need not upload. You feel free to delete them. Feel free to delete them. That doesn't mean your metadata is gone. It's just the tag that you created for the metadata is gone. That's it. Your metadata is still intact in the org. A lot of people say that, when we delete, do we not lose the metadata? No, you're not going to lose the metadata from the org like that. It's just a tag that you have created, right? So let's take another example, right? So for example, I want to pull everything that's there in my org. I want to pull every metadata component out of this org. So I'm going to say package name. So package name is Easy Spaces. Let's say I want to pull all the Easy Spaces from this. I'm going to save this. I'm going to add the top level. Again, I'm going to add the app because I know that the app has a dependency on tab, and tab has a dependency on other things, and then that has a dependency on further more things, right? So I know this. So I'm going to say add this because I know by this, it's going to pull everything there, at least connected to that app. So as you can see, there's a lot of metadata, like 81 metadata automatically got pulled in my org, right? Now I can, see if there are any more classes. Like for example, these classes did not have any dependencies because they are mostly test classes. So I can, just add them. Now, one of the key things here to understand is if you have a dynamic code, right? Usually dynamic code do not hard code and reference them. That's why there's no referenceability. So for those, you'll have to manually add. There might be some of them like that. So I'm gonna see if there are any LWC components, right? But you get the idea, right? I'm not adding a lot of things. Like these are all standard things. I'm not adding. These are all standard things that came. I'm not adding them. But you get the idea, right? So I go here and say, do I have Aura components? Okay, so I have some Aura components. I want to add them, right? So I add them and I create a package, right? But I'm not adding a lot of fields. As you can see, I'm not adding a lot of things, because a lot of the work is already done for me when I'm creating the package, right? So even if I go to customer fields, these are metadata, probably I need them. So you go and create this chain of items for you, and now what you can do is you can retrieve them. So you go and say force retrieve, and then I'm gonna put the name of the package. Now, what's the name of my package? Easy spaces, right? So this should retrieve everything there, along with the dependencies. So there it is. So if you look at this, it retrieved into a folder. Now you can see all the metadata that I have in my org is retrieved. And now from here, I can simply work in my IDE, right? And then I can simply deploy this folder to another org by just the force source deploy command. So if I use like force source deploy, I should be able to deploy this command and deploy everything. Most of the time the deployment will go fine, without a lot of troubles for me. And the reason why it will go fine here is because, again, the reason why it's going to go fine is because, so I'm going to use this for source deploy, right? And we can change the username by that U flag here, the username, the target username. We can change it. We can authenticate to multiple orgs. We can change them, right? So that's the power, of packages. It's like you tag your metadata with the package name, and then you can use that package name and use force retrieve command. Now you can also use MD API retrieve command in the same way, except that it's going to give you a package XML. So I'm going to say MD API retrieve command. It has to be force here. I can show you. You can also do this with MD API retrieve as well, except that you're going to get the package in the traditional metadata API format. Like the unzipping and the conversion to the source format doesn't happen, and that's where the force source commands are really good. So you go to MD API retrieve and you say single package. Yes, you can retrieve multiple packages as well. And then I'm gonna say yes, it's an unpackaged. So I'm gonna say unpackaged, and I can provide the package name by using the p command, right? I'm gonna say the name of the package here, easy spaces, and retrieve them. So this should work. Unexpected arguments, easy spaces. Okay, let's find out why this thing is not working. Okay, so if I use p, it has to be equal to. Okay, now it's saying I need the retrieve target directory, so I can have a retrieve target directory. Let's say my directory is, let me create a directory here called, let's create a directory called okay, I'm gonna create a directory called, I don't want to go here. Let's create a folder called metadata, right? And I want to retrieve here. Let's copy the path. Okay, so now it should retrieve. Okay, go. Okay, let's see. So the command is p is for package name. Okay, it's for unpackage. Source directory to use D, and R is the retrieve target directory. Okay, I think it should be good with this command. Okay, let's see. So P says specified path. Okay, what's the name of the single package? It should be the package name list of the source directory. Has to be the package name. This has to be the package name. Okay, package name to retrieve. Okay, that's interesting. I'm gonna use the full one now and see if this works. Okay, so now I'm gonna say instead of package names, I'm gonna say package names. Package names, and hopefully this works this time. Okay, it's looking for some path name, and I have no idea. Let's take the help of Google. Let's take help of Google. The API retrieve for package name. Here it is. P for package. Okay. That sounds like what we are doing. Might be a bug. It might be a bug. Might be a bug that we might have to let someone know about it. I'm gonna try this one more time. Bear with me. Let's try. How unexpected argument. Okay, it says enclosed in a single quote. Let's try once with single quotes. It should not matter, but right, let's read down the definitions once more. So we have single package as retrieve target. Single package is single package. Okay, maybe we don't need the S anymore. We need the K. I think the K and S are. I see. Okay, so we might need S, but we don't need K. Okay. Okay, so MD API retrieve S and R. Okay, so R should also be. Okay, there you go. Okay, so this should also be like this. All right, I think we're good now. Let's see. There you go. Okay, so we got the command to work, and yeah. So now if you look at it, right, see the job succeeded, and we have this folder called metadata. And if you look at this, this will be an unzipped file. But let me zip it. So if you look at this, it's an unzipped file. Let me unzip it. So if you go to the file, and if I go to metadata, I see this unzip. Now when I click and zip it, so if you see, it has all the folders, but look at this package.xml, right? So if you look at this, right, so it gave you the package.xml, right, for the metadata that you have. So you need not like sort of handcraft it. If you also need like a package.xml, right, anytime for anything, you can use the power of the packages here. Okay, and so the technique that I'm showing you, right, it's not just only for packages. Like you can use the technique with chain sets as well, right? So this is probably a developer org where I don't have the chain sets, but if you're on a production org, right, you create a chain set, you can add individual components to that, and then you can use the same command to retrieve the metadata from the chain sets. So the same command that we talked about today, you can instead of like providing the name of my unpackaged, right, you can this can be an unlock package name, it can be a managed package name, and it can also be a chain set name. Let's say you created a chain set called chain set X, right? You can say chain set X and retrieve it, right? And then deploy it. Now, the final thing I want to, so let's look at our slides that have we met our objectives for today. So let's go to our slides. So we understood this, right? So one of the things that I quickly want to talk about is source tracking feature, right? So source tracking feature, again, it's available for Scratch args, right? And the power of the source tracking is you don't have to, sort of track these metadata and dependency. Any metadata that you change is automatically tracked, and you work simply by a couple of commands like sfdx force, force source pull and push command. So pull to retrieve, push to push. Now if I execute a pull against this arg, it's gonna say this is only for args that have source tracking enabled, such as sandboxes and scratch args. So that's why we have sandboxes and scratch args, because source tracking, because it makes very easier, right? So once you sort of do this and organize your code into granular packages, right? From that point, you can use your sandbox and enable the source tracking, and from there, you should be free to sort of use anything. So, for example, let me see if I have an org where I can show you how to enable source tracking. So I'm gonna go back to one of the orgs that I have and show you how you can enable source tracking in the sandboxes. So again, the source tracking is not generally available at this point. It's a beta feature for sandboxes, but for Scratch args it is available. Let me see if I remember the password for this. All right, so I'm in an org where I have, this is more like a production org where I can see production features. So yeah, so if you go to Dev Hub, you will see a couple of features I want to talk about. So one of them is, enable source tracking in developer and developer pro sandboxes. Okay, so this is a really nice feature. So if you have your source already in your source control, right, you can enable this feature, and this will give you that source tracking capability. From there, you can run for source pull and push commands. Okay, so that's what I want to talk about source command. Now, quickly, I want to show you one more trick here. You can so if you are typing a lot of the commands, I recommend that you create task.json. So a lot of the commands are available as command palette. So if you go Command Shift P, you can find sfdx, and you can find all the commands that Salesforce sort of provides. Now let's say there are some commands, like for example describe metadata or MD API commands, right? Those are not there. Or for example, for source retrieve command. So for example, there's nothing called for source retrieve here. Command Shift P, sfdx for source retrieve, right? Source retrieve commands. It's not there. Retrieve this source from the org, right? It's going to retrieve the current file, but they're not. Like for example, retrieving from package, it's not provided, right? So you can create a task.json like this. So all it requires is putting your commands and then binding the inputs that you want to provide by creating an inputs here, and it's a prompt string. So for example, now if I do Command Shift B or Control Shift B in your Windows, right, you see this command which I can run. Now it's going to ask for the package name, right? So for example, my package name was Easy Spaces. So I provide the package name and then I say enter, it'll automatically start executing that command. So I don't have to, manually type. And you can, just put a comma and create as many as commands. Like for example, you can create one for deployment. You can create one for retrieving, describing metadata, listing metadata, right? So you can create all of these commands, and you can say Command Shift B and pick up one of those commands without having to type. That's going to accelerate with, you don't have to remember all of these commands. You provide your own sort of a UI for those commands where it's still not baked into the official Salesforce extension pack. You can easily create your own menus by providing a task.json like this. You can find this task.json here on my gist. So you can go to gist.salesforce.com and you can go to my GitHub handle and find all the gists, and there is a gist for some of the task.json files, like for example running This is for security scans. I might have one for retrieving from the package. I think this is one for the retrieving from the package. It's for retrieving from the package, right? So you can get some task.json so that you can do these things very easily. All right, with that, I want to take some time and thanks everyone for joining this session. If you have any feedback, I have my Twitter handle there. Please do reach out to me via my Twitter handle, and hopefully we'll see you next time with different topics. Till then, goodbye. Thank you.